Good afternoon. Well, after all this nice music, what I'm not going to do is give a climate lecture. And this is certainly a different sort of group than I would normally speak to. But I think what I've found is, as a climate scientist, is that we've spent 20, 30 years now measuring the Earth system quite carefully in many dimensions, but we find that simply gathering facts is not enough. And so what I realize now is the other part of my job is to motivate society to do something. And so while I've worked with my science colleagues for many years, we've measured this Earth in so many different ways, from the South Pole to the bottom of the ocean, measured the Amazon forests, measured our own glaciers of Glacier National Park. We measure the atmosphere. We measure so many different things, and we continue to see evidence of degradation of our biosphere on a global scale. And so, as Deborah said, we've written a number of major documents. We write thousands and thousands of papers, and so we've documented the science. And what we realize now is we have to get society as a whole to be motivated to start pushing for change. And I think that's why I come to events like this and talk to people like you, is beyond simply knowing the facts about how the Earth is changing. We all have to start pushing to make the kind of changes in the future that will literally save the planet. We clearly see, for example, that the world has to quit burning coal. We see that as our highest, literally our highest priority in climate change work is clearly to us to quit burning coal for electric power worldwide. And so it's quite ironic that I was at the farmers market in Missoula just about 4 hours ago, and one of the vendors recognized me, and we were talking. He said 3 coal trains have gone through Missoula this morning alone. And it illustrates to me in a very local, real sense the problem. As I ride my bike to the university every day, I go under an underpass of the train tracks, and probably 3 days out of 5, there goes a coal train. And those coal trains are primarily going to Asia, and I can't think of anything more irrational on a global sense to dig up something as dirty and cheap as coal and ship it 6,000 miles to Asia, where they burn it, and the carbon pollution comes back faster than the boats do. It literally comes back in the atmosphere faster than the empty boats come back to get more. And so I really come to an event like this to encourage people like you to get active in your community, and I hate to say it, get active politically, which is something I've always resisted. We have to convince our political leaders that the status quo of energy in this country is not going to continue. And there's a lot of big money against us. In fact, all the big money of all the fossil fuel industry is all against us, every one of them. And so that's our adversary. And so we have to motivate society as a whole to say no in a very focused way to our political leaders, in the old days, you used to write letters to the editor of the newspaper. I don't know if anybody does that anymore. Maybe you write blog posts or something like that. But you really, all of us need to continue the pressure on our political and business leaders to start a change of course, or I hate to see what this garden's going to look like 100 years from now. This is really the sort of place that 100 years of climate change, it's not going to do very well in these arid mountain valleys of the West. And so in a quite literal sense, to save this place, to save this garden and the entire biosphere with it, all of us have to get to work on convincing our leaders that the change in our energy future is now time. Now I couldn't say this 2 years ago, but I'm actually seeing some promising news. As I watch every single day, I watch the international news events, and I'm seeing major economic powers like the World Bank state that they will not give loans for coal-fired plants anymore, for example. I'm seeing major investment houses like Goldman Sachs say that they're starting to withdraw all their funds from fossil fuel companies. I'm seeing major corporations, starting with, of course, the Googles and the Apples of the world, but even going to corporations like Walmart, which probably a lot of this crowd looks at rather dimly. Walmart is investing an unbelievable amount of money in solar panels on all their new stores, on high efficiency trucks for all their transport, and it's in a way it's sobering for somebody like me to admit, but what Walmart does probably matters more than anything else because they influence so much of the world's economy. And so this is a challenge to all of us to engage with corporations like that because they can make a lot of difference. And I'm seeing more and more that a number of them are. So I'm starting to really see some momentum finally coming in our direction. And I think I'll end with my most favorite new bit of evidence in this is the Pope. And I'm no Catholic supporter normally, but it is quite unbelievable how pointed and open the Pope's encyclical on climate was in June. If you haven't read that, go Google it and read it. It's 192 pages of more hard science than I ever thought any Pope ever knew. And he has the science right, and he is out to motivate the Catholics of the world, all billion of them. And I think finally we have a religious leader that has very high profile and is really challenging not only his own religious followers, but I think our political leaders and all the rest of us, that it's time that the world start to turn away from fossil fuels and get to a renewable energy future. And so I never thought I would cheer for a Pope so much as I've done in the last 3 months, but he is incredibly, he may be the single most influential climate policy maker in the whole world right now, believe it or not, because of how many people he can influence. You know, when he gave a talk in the Philippines 3 or 4 months ago, 10 million people showed up to hear him talk. Now, I didn't exactly draw 10 million people today, did I? And so that's the difference between me and the Pope. And but all kidding aside, all of us need to help, and we need to help by really encouraging, and more than encouraging, is really demanding from our political and civic leadership that the world's changing and the energy future has to change, and that you expect them to make that change in their policy. And so I really come to these kind of events to try to get all of us to start making our voices heard, because I think we're now starting to turn the corner, and hopefully 100 years from now this garden will be spectacular. The trees will be 100 feet tall, and it'll be a wonderful place for at least for our grandchildren. Thank you very much.